This strange ritual could only happen in one place in the world, an island called Hispaniola in the Galapagos Island archipelago. The Galapagos are famous for their unique species, such as giant tortoises, and some seabirds too. But many others come here just to nest. This is the story of those ocean travelers. The ocean travelers come to the Galapagos Islands from far and wide across the Pacific. Apart from one small colony, the waved albatross nests only on the island of Hispaniola. Most of the other avian travelers nest in many parts of the tropical oceans. But the seas of the Galapagos have a special attraction for many species of seabirds. These are blue-footed boobies, relatives of the Atlantic gannet. And the Galapagos has its own subspecies of brown pelican. Frigate birds are the pirates of the air. Two species nest in the Galapagos. They remain near the islands most of the time. Masked boobies nest on many islands in the Galapagos group. These swallow-tailed gulls only visit the islands in order to breed. Many other seabirds also travel long distances to their nesting grounds in the Galapagos. An incoming flight of red-billed tropic birds, perhaps the most graceful of all Galapagos seabirds. They seek holes in the lava in which to nest. The Galapagos belong to Ecuador. They lie 1,000 kilometers west of the mainland and consist of 13 main islands plus about 40 islets and isolated rocks. All are visited by nesting seabirds. Some are especially favored because the visitors find conditions for breeding ideal there. These include Hispaniola, Isabella, Fernandina, Genovesa, and Wolf, nearly 100 kilometers north of its nearest neighbor. All are volcanic, their interiors rough and inhospitable. But it's the coastal areas that mainly attract the seabirds. Fernandina, with its huge volcano in the background, is a mass of jagged, brittle lava. Like all the Galapagos Islands, it has many surprises, like these brackish pools amid the lava flows. Hispaniola, still sometimes known by its old name of Hood, is a flat-topped expanse of lava upthrust from the seabed. Much of its surface is covered with coarse vegetation, which many seabirds, including the waved albatross, nest in. Isabella is the largest of the islands, over 100 kilometers long, and topped by 5 great volcanoes, including Alcedo, Wolf, and Darwin. At the northern tip is the now collapsed volcano called Ecuador. The ruined walls of Ecuador volcano show how wild the Galapagos landscape is. Punta Vicente Roca, with its high cliffs and beautiful hidden cove, is a favorite haunt of blue-footed boobies. Genovesa was formed by 2 small extinct volcanoes. Its anchorage, Darwin Bay, is the crater of one of them. The seaward part of the crater has disappeared, giving boats entrance. The gentle slopes of the main crater are covered with cacti, scrub, and silvery Palo Santo trees. Genovesa has frigate and booby colonies, as well as hundreds of thousands of nesting storm petrels. Wolf, originally known as Wenman Island, is isolated far to the north. It's the eroded top of a huge volcano rising 2,000 meters from the seabed. Its steep cliffs are so high, over 200 meters, and its landing places so hazardous that few people have ever reached the top. Why are these barren islands so attractive to seabirds? Although they're on the equator, the Galapagos lie in the path of food-rich cold water currents. These currents usually produce fish in great abundance. Brown pelicans are not the most graceful of diving birds, but they're highly successful, both in catching big fish and in scooping up smaller fish among the shallows. Wherever the complex system of ocean currents brings upwellings of nutrients, fish of all sizes abound. Rainbow runners are in the middle range. They've been panicked by larger predators, possibly a shoal of tuna or jacks, or even a fishing flock of blue-footed boobies. There is a small group of seabirds who made the journey to the Galapagos long ago and then stayed to evolve as separate species. Now they're endemic to the islands. The swallowtail gull is one. With its forked tail and long wings, it resembles a tern rather than a gull. The swallowtail is the only gull that feeds exclusively at night, probably to escape ruthless persecution from frigate birds. However, marine iguanas pose no threat to the gulls, with which they share the lava outcrops. Like the kittiwake of the northern hemisphere, the swallowtail gull is a cliff nester. Most gull species lay 3 eggs. The swallowtail lays only 1 to produce a single chick. This species is so unlike other gulls that it's placed in a separate genus. The other unique Galapagos gull is an altogether duller-looking bird. It matches the lava from which it takes its name. The lava gull is closely related to the laughing gull of the mainland. There are approximately 400 pairs, all in the Galapagos. Sharing the mud with the lava gulls is a migrant wader, the whimbrel. Also among the travelers who arrived long ago and stayed to evolve into separate endemic species is the Galapagos penguin. They're the most northerly penguins in the world. Penguins are cold water species, but in the Galapagos they live right on the equator. There's little doubt what brought them here in the first place. They followed the cold waters of the Peril current up the coast of South America to the point where it's deflected westwards towards the islands. In evolving as a separate species, they've become considerably smaller than their South American relatives. There are only a few thousand Galapagos penguins, and their main breeding colonies are around the Bolivar Channel between the islands of Fernandina and Isabella. Here, the east-flowing Cromwell or equatorial undercurrent produces cold water upwellings rich in food. Galapagos penguins only breed when the water temperature is low enough, around 24 degrees centigrade. They lay 2 eggs, and when their food supply is good, sometimes manage to rear both chicks. These youngsters are molting their infant down. For the first 6 months, they'll lack the adult's banded pattern. Another seabird, which arrived and then evolved to become a Galapagos species, has a lot in common with the penguin, for it can't fly either. The bird tweaking the iguana's tail is a Galapagos flightless cormorant. Penguins and cormorants nest side by side around the shores of Fernandina and Isabella. Blue eyes provide the bird with superb underwater vision when hunting eels, squid, and octopus. Though the cormorants still possess a preen gland, with which most seabirds waterproof their feathers, scientists believe the gland no longer has any purpose in this species. All the bird's propulsion underwater is provided by its flipper-like feet. The flightless cormorant has some unusual courtship displays, including a ritualized circling dance. This is followed by bowing and head shaking. At an advanced stage of the courtship, the male brings his mate bunches of seaweed gathered underwater. He offers her items of nesting material as a way of cementing their pair bond. On the Galapagos island of Hispaniola, the courtship of the waved albatrosses is in full swing. The colonies are sited near the beach or cliff edge. These flat surfaces offer the only good landing and takeoff sites. Albatross courtship ranks among nature's noisiest as well as most complicated nuptial ceremonies. The routine follows a set pattern. This includes bowing, bill fencing, calling, and solo clicking of bills. It usually takes place close to the proposed nesting site. The waved albatross doesn't make a proper nest, though it sometimes gathers a little nearby vegetation and arranges it around the hollow where it's laid its single egg. This bird is shedding salt water through its nostrils, so it's obviously recently returned from the sea. The single egg weighs over 200 grams. Rearing their young is a slow process for all albatrosses. The egg takes 2 months to hatch. Even after egg laying, courtship continues. The pair will share the brooding and feeding duties, so it's important that the bond between them remains strong. Takeoff is something of a problem for a bird with an overall wingspan of almost 3 meters. A headwind is essential, and often it's only to be found on the beach. So the birds waddle down from the colony, sometimes propositioning each other while they wait for favorable weather conditions to take off. The waved albatross is one of several species of seabirds that reach the Galapagos and later settle to breed there. There's one other water bird whose presence in the islands is far less likely than that of the seabirds. Flamingos live in the lava deserts of these practically waterless islands. There are approximately 500 of them. They somehow manage to find enough brine shrimps and other invertebrates in brackish lagoons and small pools amid the lava flows. The flamingos of the Galapagos are descendants of those of the West Indies and Caribbean. But unlike flamingos elsewhere, which always nest in large colonies, the Galapagos flamingos live and even breed in much smaller groups. Flamingos in a volcanic wilderness, a strange combination. But nothing in the Galapagos is quite like anything anywhere else on Earth. Punta Vicente Roca is part of the collapsed volcano Ecuador on the northeast tip of the largest island, Isabela. Here, in one of the small craters, is a colony of one of the archipelago's most famous ocean travelers, the blue-footed booby. There are the famous blue feet that give the bird its name. The female in the foreground is slightly larger than her mate. The pupil of her eye appears larger, while the calls of the sexes differ too. Three species of booby, the masked, red-footed and blue-footed, all travel to the Galapagos to nest. But the bluefoot outdoes the others in its spectacular displays. The feet-up landing is all part of the performance designed to impress a mate, as is the high-stepping march that follows. That's the male with his head feathers fluffed out. In order to attract a mate, he turns his wings almost inside out. Sometimes this sky pointing, as it's called, is done to impress prospective partners flying overhead. These two have probably paired already with each other. Adult seabirds in the Galapagos have relatively few predators, but the Galapagos hawk is always on the lookout for unguarded young. The hawk, another species unique to the islands, is really a buzzard. Numbering only a few hundred, they feed on carrion, but also kill lava lizards, small iguanas, and juvenile boobies. The silhouette of the Galapagos hawk is unmistakably buzzard-like. This species still thrives in fair numbers on Isabella, but there are some islands, like Genovesa, which it never colonized. However, the ocean travelers which do nest on Genovesa have other enemies. The low scrub contains one of the main breeding colonies of great frigate birds. They're ocean travelers too, though when breeding they're tied more closely to the islands. They care for their offspring for up to 18 months. The red throat sac is inflated when the male becomes excited in courtship. The process takes about 20 minutes. When it's blown up, he sits with his head propped on the pouch, waiting for a female to fly over. Sometimes he even gets airborne while his throat sac is still enlarged. When a male spots a female flying over, he vibrates his wings and at the same time produces a series of high-pitched clucking calls. Groups of males usually display close together. If a female is enticed down, the males give a harsh rattling sound. If she accepts one, she answers his calls and moves her head from side to side. Unsuccessful males move off to join another display group. Apart from mating and feeding, a major preoccupation of frigate birds is stealing, including nesting material which they happily thieve from each other. Beside the frigate birds on Genovesa nest the second booby species of the Galapagos, the red-footed boobies. Red-footed boobies are quite different in behavior from their blue-footed relatives. They are tree nesters, which is a fairly unusual habit for a seabird. Even with their webbed feet, they're able to grip the branches to keep balance. And where the bluefoot fishes inshore, redfoots feed far out to sea, largely on flying fish. Like many ocean birds, red-footed boobies are clumsy on land. This one is having considerable trouble building a nest. But there are worse things to cope with when nesting. Red-footed booby nests are a prime source of nesting material for raiding frigate birds. The frigate bird is probably the finest flyer of all seabirds. Half its weight is in its flight muscles, while the ratio of wingspan to weight is the greatest of any seabird. Its forked tail can be instantly trimmed as a rudder to change direction. Frigate birds can soar effortlessly or turn in their own length to catch a fleeing booby with a crop full of fish. Here the target is a red-footed booby returning from fishing. The tactic is to scare the booby into disgorging its fish, which the frigates catch in mid-air. It's probable that they can tell whether a booby is worth chasing by its call, as it makes a different sound when its crop is full of fish. If they keep up the pursuit, they're usually successful. There's a more dangerous predator on Genovesa for the smaller birds. The Galapagos short-eared owl is a local representative of a species also found in Britain. In the Galapagos, it occurs on practically all the islands. It's an opportunist feeder that hunts wherever food, mainly birds, is plentiful. On Genovesa, it's attracted by thousands of pairs of Galapagos storm petrels nesting in crevices in the lava. These swallow-sized birds are perfect prey for a large owl. The tiny storm petrels are tube noses, distant relatives of albatrosses. They're thought to be among the most numerous seabirds in the world. Over the cliffs of Genovesa, They fly in dense clouds, like gnats. On islands where there are no hawks, the owls hunt by day, catching their prey on the ground. On some islands, the owls prey extensively on birds as large as young boobies and frigates. A lava gull makes short work of an unwary petrel. When it comes to general harassment of the other avian inhabitants of Genovesa, the frigate birds are in a class of their own. This time the target is tropic birds, carrying small fish back to their tunnel nests in the lava. A tropic bird isn't always safe, even after it's landed. But the juvenile frigate bird misjudged its approach and crash-landed. Tropic birds, which plunge dive for their food like boobies, are comparatively slow flyers. They're no match for a single frigate bird, let alone several. The most southerly of the Galapagos Islands is Hispaniola, which the waved albatrosses nest on. It's also favored by masked boobies. Ecologically, they come between the other two booby species. The red-footed fishes far out to sea, the blue-footed close inshore. The masked booby fishes the middle ground, so the three seldom compete. The masked booby lays 2 eggs. Both usually hatch several days apart, but the masked booby only ever rears one of its 2 chicks. Because they hatch about 5 days apart, one chick is bigger and stronger than the other. As soon as it's able to, the large chick evicts its weaker sibling from the nest. The parent remains completely unmoved by this. So only one chick is raised. The sacrifice of one chick may be related to the available food supply, though it occurs at a very early stage, whether food is plentiful or not. The masked booby may be limited by nature to raising a single chick. Possibly 2 eggs are an insurance policy. If the first chick hatches successfully, it kills the second one, which might otherwise take part of the food supply. The Hispaniola mockingbirds profit from this unusual rearing method. As so often, it's the frigate bird which gets the prize. At the albatross colonies on Hispaniola, the production of young is well underway. Both parents spend the best part of 9 months ensuring that their single chick reaches independence. Albatrosses pair for life and don't breed until they're 5 or 6 years old. There are 2 main breeding colonies at opposite ends of the island. Between them, they contain almost the total known world breeding population of these birds, about 12,000 pairs. Egg laying starts in April, and the last young leave in January. Albatrosses feed their young on fish oil produced in their stomach. The oil is squirted down the chick's throat in response to its begging behavior. A large chick may receive nearly 2 kilos at a time of this rich, fishy secretion. After a feed, the young are so full they have difficulty supporting their own weight. The system has the advantage that the parents can stay fishing at sea for several days at a time. Other seabirds, which don't manufacture oil in their stomachs, have to return to feed their young before they themselves digest the catch. Mockingbirds quickly clear up any spilt fish oil. Though fratricide can't occur in single chick families, larger young sometimes bully their smaller neighbors. Landing and takeoff are never easy for albatrosses. Their runways are strewn with volcanic boulders, and the necessary headwind isn't always present. For a bird with such an enormous wingspan, the process of learning to fly is a difficult one, even when conditions are ideal. Once they're qualified flyers, the young birds will stay at sea for 5 or 6 years before returning to breed. These early years are the most hazardous ones. If the young survive them, they may well live to be 30 or 40. Darwin and Wolf are the most northerly islands of the archipelago. They're both almost totally inaccessible. The first problem about getting ashore on Wolf is to find a landing place. The second, to defeat the heavy swell. Then there are near vertical cliffs to be scaled. The lava is crumbly and the ridges precarious. The reward on reaching the plateau at the top is to discover a lost world in which few people have ever set foot before. The seabirds here are those already met on the more accessible islands, species like the masked booby. But some strange things have happened to the masked boobies on Wolf Island. Charles Darwin showed how Galapagos finches had evolved and adapted to conditions on different islands. The sharp-beaked ground finches on Wolf Island seem to prove his point even further. Masked boobies and ground finches occur on many of the islands, but on Darwin and Wolf Islands, the finches have become tiny vampires, pecking at the bases of the boobies' wing feathers and feeding on the fresh blood which is stored there. On these two waterless, barren islands, the finches have found and exploited a vital new source of liquid food. And on Wolf Island, the ground finch has discovered the masked boobies provide another source of food. This small, enterprising bird has become an egg thief. The bill of the sharp-beaked ground finch is powerful enough to peck open even a seabird's strong egg. But it often finds it easier to roll the egg over the lava rocks until it cracks. When the egg gets stuck in a cleft in the rock, it pushes it from behind. Finally, it reaches a place where it can deal with the egg, rolling it back and forth in the hope that it will break. Eventually, the shell cracks and the finch's sharp beak can break in. Another source of protein for the enterprising finches of Wolf Island. Just as the woodpecker finch discovered how to use a twig to winkle insects out of rotten trees, so the sharp-beaked ground finches of Wolf have made their own breakthrough. Charles Darwin showed how the isolation of the islands from each other by winds, sea currents, and distance had caused the fauna of each to evolve in its own separate way. Wolf Island is isolated from all the others except nearby Darwin. This could explain why the habits of blood-sucking or egg-rolling haven't spread to finches elsewhere. It's often said that on the Galapagos, more than anywhere else on Earth, evolution can be seen in action. The sharp-beaked ground finches of Wolf are certainly behaving in true Darwinian fashion. Perhaps the most typical of all the seabirds that visit the Galapagos are the blue-footed boobies. Birds from one of the colonies on Isabella have spotted a large shoal of fish. They're flying out to plunge dive on them. It's this great abundance of food that draws the ocean travelers, in their thousands, to the islands of the Galapagos.